Hello, my name is Emily Williamson. I'm an ethnomusicologist and educator based in the Bronx, New York. My research and presentation analyze the community music of son jarocho, a Mexican tradition that has found new roots in US cities, including New York City. My presentation is titled Community Music in an Inaccessible New York, Son Jarocho Musical and Cultural Pedagogy. Son jarocho is a Mexican music, dance, and poetic tradition originating from the area of southern Veracruz along the Gulf Coast of Mexico. It is one of the many son traditions throughout Mexico and has recently been, quote unquote, revived in the last few decades of the 20th century up until the present. The music of son jarocho features mostly singing, string instruments, a dance called zapateado, which is performed on top of a wooden platform called a tarima, and the singing of poetic verses. The music and dance are traditionally performed at a community music event called a fandango, which is seen in the image of the slide. A fandango has a circular formation with the wooden tarima in the center and participants gathered around it, playing their stringed instruments and exchanging turns singing verses. The recent revival, or what is called the movimiento jaranero, has recentered and emphasized the fandango as the essential community building activity in son jarocho. The image you see is a typical fandango in New York City. It resembles the fandangos that occur elsewhere, wherever son jarocho is practiced, be it Mexico City, Veracruz, or Los Angeles, California. Since the revival, there is significant foreign interest in son jarocho, resulting in the development of son jarocho communities outside the traditional region of Veracruz across both Mexico and the United States. The son jarocho community of New York City has been playing son jarocho for a little over a decade. The community fits common definitions of quote-unquote community music through its dedication to provide musical learning in non-institutional settings for very low cost or for free. The New York City son jarocho community also shares the goals of broad access for its participants to engage with son jarocho and Mexican musical traditions, and to include as many Mexican immigrants as possible, and really anyone who wants to learn these traditions. Overall, the character of the community is one of inclusion, with the further goal of incorporating people of different socioeconomic class backgrounds. In other words, there is a recognition among leaders in the community to make efforts to include working class participants, which is still quite difficult, even with accessible, low-cost music lessons. Despite the fact that New York City remains one of the only cities in the United States with a 24-hour public transportation system and other public infrastructure and programs that provide important support for many working people, New York presents certain material barriers, namely the cost of living, that make musical participation very difficult for many. The number one issue for many community members is simply time. Of course, this is common for any person living in our contemporary society, but for working class and even some middle class folks, time outside of work is precious and limited. With the cost of rent and other basic necessities increasing, full-time work often barely covers basic monthly expenses for working people. Commute times in New York City will vary, but a normal commute to and from work for many can easily be 2 to 3 hours per day. A single subway ride between the boroughs of, for example, Brooklyn and Queens, as seen in red and green in the map, will take at least 1.5 hours, and that's just one direction. In addition to time, many participants cannot access affordable childcare. Some mothers of the community have been able to bring their children to son jarocho classes and fandangos, but this is a temporary solution, especially for young children who need much more supervision. The son jarocho community attempts to mitigate the issues of access in a number of ways. First, the music lessons attend to the needs of Mexican immigrant population in New York. Music classes are in Spanish, and give inherent value to Mexican culture, something many Mexican participants seek. For the young bilingual students in Son Jarocho classes, Spanish is something that is spoken in their home, but they likely do not have much experience with learned Spanish in a classroom or academic setting. Son Jarocho classes provide an exposure to learned Spanish and some Spanish literacy through verse singing and writing, which is invaluable for these young bilinguals. There are no auditions to join the community. The participants begin with whatever skills they currently have. Musical notation is not used in classes. Instead, mnemonic device is most common in Son Jarocho pedagogy. Some mnemonic devices are particular to Son Jarocho, such as rhythmic patterns, but solfa or solfege syllables for pitch are used as well, but they use, of course, the Spanish system. Most participants do not own their own instruments at first, and the community has been able to find funding, grant funding, for lute making, but still, owning an instrument is not required. Many community members share instruments when possible, and others simply focus on dance or singing instead of playing an instrument to participate in the musical community. Besides providing low-cost lessons, the Son Jarocho classes tend to roam across different locations in New York. There have been classes in 4 out of the 5 boroughs, including Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx, but there are yet to have classes in Staten Island. Fandangos, as mentioned, are the central community building events for the Son Jarocho community. Fandangos used to be held monthly, but this became unsustainable in recent years, and the community reduced the fandangos to 4 to 5 times per year. So instead of monthly fandangos, fandangos are held on significant holidays or special events. Because sustained and long-term participation from working class individuals is quite difficult, the community's membership has begun to perform publicly more often as a way to bridge the access gap and bring Son Jarocho directly to immigrant communities. Small performing groups schedule and plan performances in public schools, churches, and in community-based nonprofits. This does not create new membership for the Son Jarocho classes, but it does share Son Jarocho with a wider audience, one that may not have access to the tradition otherwise. Thank you.